Right now we are midway through the South. I mean, people have received their copies of Wayfarers, which is the first game. We've finished designing Scholars, but that hasn't launched on Kickstarter yet. And actually we've been working on Inventors, the third title, quite a bit. So we're really in the midst of it. I'd say most of the design work is done. There's a lot of development still to do.
I think it's always interesting when we start a new trilogy because we don't know how these games will be received. Even based off previous trilogies, we're still this kind of unknown, we've worked on these games for a few years now, but Wayfarers just came out, which has been pretty well received, we think. And then Scholars is designed, but we don't know if it's going to be too heavy or what people expect. And then Inventors is still, a few years away. So there's all this kind of thing of, I hope we're on the right track, because it's kind of too late now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit wary about the way that we're designing. Things are just getting heavier and heavier, which obviously we're enjoying it. We're enjoying the games that we're designing, but we just hope we're not leaving people behind that really enjoyed, Architects, Raiders, and these games are sort of pushing a little bit heavier as we try to innovate.
Now we're trying to beat the West with the South, which is going to be a big challenge for us, we think, but so far we're very happy with what we're making and what we're designing.
If I can make a prediction right now, I think it's just going to continue that trend of there's no consensus around what's best. We've had people saying that Wayfarers is their favourite title, and there's others that say, it slots in at number 2 or 3 and they really enjoy it. If that's the finished result, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
But if there's a consensus that South is better, I'm even more happy, yeah.
I think if we were to hear that the South Trilogy is not as good as the West, that would be a pretty big downer for us to feel like we haven't progressed as designers, and just to feel like maybe we've peaked too early. And it's always a challenge and always something we want to achieve, is to keep people interested in bringing new things.
So Shem, very early on, I might add, said, right, this is going to be a dice trilogy. And dice have been used in lots of ways in the past, and we didn't want to just create 3 games with the exact same dice mechanisms.
One of the most difficult things about dice is that they're very abstract. You've got usually pips, like numbers, and colours. So that makes you think of Uno, or anything that's just numbers and colours. It's hard to get theme into those. Often dice are used more in quite thematic games for that risk and that feeling of moment and wow and stuff happening, craziness and chaos. We're using dice in ways where they're about action taking and manipulation and using them in certain ways. So which does lean to that weird abstractness where you don't feel the theme. So we're trying to make sure we do as much with taking away the abstract nature of dice as we can. One big change from a development point of view for the South from the West for us has been using Tabletop Simulator for online playtesting. With the West, it was very much a lot of 2-player playtesting and then getting friends around and playing the game. But you can't do that as often as you'd like, of course. So with TTS, we can now use our Discord server to get people to join and play games almost on a daily basis. So these South games are getting played a lot more than any of our previous games have been tested before. When you're first starting out as a designer or a self-publisher, you have to listen to everyone because you're learning so much so fast. And then for me at least, there's been this process of you slowly start to trust yourself more and more. But we're always listening, always trying to be aware, but it's about knowing who to listen to and what you're listening for.
A big part of our design process actually early on is Shem asking, how can we make this look different on the table?
Yeah.
So you had this idea of this kind of stretched out landscape. Each of our games is trying to look different in terms of the shape as well as the visuals.
One cool part about the South from an art direction point of view is what you visually see in the world. The West is very green, lots of forests and hills and things, whereas the South, we've actually got Wayfarers with showing stars and planets and comets and waterways and all sorts of vistas, which is why I made that game actually the first game, for one reason, was that it would look very different to the West games. There's not this green lush landscape, there's this night sky and everything going on as well.
Overall, how I feel about the South is that we've sort of, even though it's not finished yet, we've sort of achieved our goal of each of these games standing apart, being different, and being strong games in their own right, much like with the West. I can honestly say that I'm proud of each of these games, that they are really interesting and unique experiences with a lot of fun. So I'm stoked that the West wasn't just a fluke, and that we have managed to carry on what Shem started with Shipwrights, and where I jumped in with Architects, we've been able to continue that pedigree of great games.
Overall, with the South, I'm really happy with where the games have landed. We feel like they are all unique. They all stand apart, much like the West. They're very strong games, and they're not just sort of clones of each other. The fact that they're all 3 different dice-based games with different mechanisms, I'm stoked. I'm so happy with how they've turned out.